Well, welcome, friends. This is another webinar of the Mid-America region on ministering with older adults, and we'll tell you exactly how or what topics we'll focus on here today with our presenters who will introduce themselves. But we are thankful that you have found this webinar, and hopefully will learn things that you could apply in your ministry setting. And certainly we would love to hear from you of ideas and how you feel contributions could come. So thank you for being a part of this, and welcome to all those who are with us as well. So I will screen share and begin with the PowerPoint that will guide us so far. And today's topic, tapping the power of older adults and touching the lives of others. So go ahead and take it away, my friends, my leaders.
Kim, go ahead.
Sure, I'll go ahead and get us started. I'm Kim Leon, and I am currently wearing a lot of different hats. I'm the Assistant Director of the Columbia Area Older Adult Ministry with Reverend Sally Robinson. I'm also working as a hospice chaplain and am currently a student at Phillips Seminary and in the ordination process with Disciples of Christ. So my focus is older adult ministry, and that's what I hope to pursue as I finish seminary and get through the ordination process, looking towards chaplaincy with older adults.
Thanks, Kim. And I am Jan Airy. I coordinate the Older Adult Ministries program for our region. I am, as you can see, a counselor and a gerontologist, and I've long time had a passion with churches and with communities to work with older adults, but to find ways to blend the generations together. My real passion these days is especially caregiving, caregivers, sharing that, and shared living as well. We'll talk a little bit more about that later. But Kim and I would like to begin with sharing with you some thoughts we have on defining exactly what intergenerational ministry is. First of all, it's intentional. We're going to go into that in a little bit more detail, but what we mean by intentional is that congregations place a high value on every age within the congregation and develop programs around it in a very intentional kind of way. In intergenerational programs, it does not mean that we are eliminating age-specific programs because every developmental age has its own specific needs. But in the case of intergenerational programming and activities, we're talking about the blending, the mutual sharing, and not just respect, but of sharing mutually in experiences, in skills, in life enhancement, faith formation, and so many other kinds of ways. We know that if we do not emphasize this within congregations, we may not find the richness and the growth and formation of faith that's so key and important to every age group, actually. So if we look at everyone equally within our ages and within our group, then we know that this intentionality is going to evolve into something that has to be active. If we simply nod our heads to intergenerational groupings within our church and within our congregation, then we really are failing at intergenerational ministry that creates the kind of relationships that we all can learn from with varying ages. It used to be historically that small churches and congregations were felt to be inferior because they didn't have many numbers of various ages within their church and needed to do the combined intergenerational programming. Well, we now know, not only through our faith and our churches, but also through our culture and society, that it's absolutely essential. And that what this does when blending ages is to create the kind of understanding, empathy, but also the sharing of the kinds of gifts that every age group has unique to itself. So in the next slide, I want to show you some statistics that are secular for our country. They were done through the study, as you'll see at the bottom of the screen, by Generations United. This is new information or recently studied and not so new perhaps to you. So as you see with the heading, many older adults and Americans would like to spend more time with other age groups. That we may have surmised. But did you know that 8 million children live in a household headed by a grandparent or other relative? That number may be larger than you thought it could be. But Generations United has a grand family program and project in which they're creating policies and projects and programs to emphasize fairness and support and ways that we can, as a country, attend to the needs of this unique blending of family. Well, most people believe that serving children and older adults together in the same location is a good source or good use of resources, as well as it may even be something that people would agree they could support with their taxes. But the irony of all of this is that while many do believe this, it is not growing significantly in terms of our own efforts and programs within our country. There are not any more than around 300 such projects that are known by Generations United. So here is the call to our churches and the call of necessity and opportunity that's growing for us. While most adults believe that intergenerational activities do help with easing loneliness and isolation, we now are finding that with our digital world, and especially with the pandemic, that need is growing even more greatly. But we also know that children who have not grown up with the benefit of a grandparent or of an older adult within their own sphere of life and experience are really missing and lacking in something that they could learn and grow from that will set them on a new path or a different path throughout their entire life. So the next slide is a quotation, which I'm going to read to you because I think it's a little bit of a tongue twister. Every age has gifts we need, and every age has needs we gift. So what we're going to emphasize today is that older adults, while they have their own specific needs, have so many gifts and responsibilities toward other ages within our culture, our communities, our church, and our neighborhoods, that those are the kinds of gifts that we want to look at. We often feel that certain age groups may have gifts that are forgotten or ignored, and many times we say that is true of older adults. We want to come past the stereotypes that are there to see whether we can have movement and activity and not just a stuckness or a waiting on the part of older adults to be seen even or to be heard. And so as we continue on with our discussion and definition of what intergenerational ministry means, I'd invite Kim to share with us a little bit about her thoughts next.
Yes. Okay, so in terms of intergenerational ministry, I think as the church, we have a unique opportunity to really build intergenerational bridges, because we are, if you think about it, one of the only settings where we have people of different ages coming together on a regular basis. So I think that really gives us a unique opportunity to engage in this work. Paul, can we go to the next slide? And I think if we look at from a faith-based perspective, being the church, we see that there are biblical precedents for intergenerational ministry. throughout both the Hebrew Bible and the New Testament, we see this as a model of ministry. In the Hebrew Bible, the Israelites were a relational community with all ages participating together. And I've got some scripture references there. I won't go through and read all of those. You can certainly read those on your own later. And I think, and then can we go back? I wasn't quite done with that one. Okay, thank you. In the New Testament, of course, we have the house churches meeting with all present for worship. And if we look at our scriptures from a perspective of themes that we see recurring throughout, I think we see Christian formation taking place in community, and we see commands to share our faith with future generations, as well as, of course, Paul's thought of the church being one body with many equally valuable parts. So I think we have a solid foundation in scripture for engaging in a call really to engage in intergenerational ministry. Okay, now I'm ready. So one thing that I was thinking about in really thinking through information for this webinar is, I think oftentimes when we think about intergenerational programs or ministry, we talk about the benefits for children, and those are certainly there and are certainly important. But I think there's also a lot of benefits for our elders. One that we hear about a lot is decreases in depression and loneliness, increased life satisfaction and self-worth. So that is certainly, I think, a benefit of intergenerational contact for our older adults. That I believe from a theological perspective also helps reaffirm for them that they are God's beloved children. No matter how old we are still special. We are still God's beloved. A second benefit is helping, can you go back, Paul? Sorry. Helping older adults create meaning and purpose. We know that this can be a challenge in older adulthood. And, in terms of ministry and Christian education, we talk about vocation. We often focus on vocation for younger people, but vocation is part of our Christian journey throughout life at all ages. And I think when we provide ways to help older adults create that meaning and purpose, we help them in fulfilling their Christian vocation. Third, enriching faith formation. And I think a lot of times we think about faith formation as happening through childhood, adolescence, young adulthood, and then it kind of like we just get there, it stops, we're done. But really faith formation is lifelong. And there is some interesting research that has been done finding that adults' faith formation can be impacted by spending time with children and younger people, because children often see things in ways that we as adults don't. They can point us to things we overlook, and we can gain insights from them into some key areas of faith and hear and experience the message of the gospel in fresh, new ways. Okay. We're good, Paul. I'm sorry. I pause sometimes, and I know that's confusing because that makes you think I'm done. So in terms of becoming more intergenerational, I'm good now. I am done now. Yeah. we're
Is this
ready.
the slide you want here, next one?
Yeah, this one. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah, we're good. We're good. So in terms of how we can move forward in terms of incorporating more intergenerational efforts into our ministries, I'm going to just talk about some overarching ideas for that. And then next, we'll have Alexis, who's going to get into a more specific example of this type of work. So I think one key point is assessing the congregation. Where are you now and where do you want to go? There is a tool on the resource list that we will send out that is a congregational assessment you could use for something more formal, or of course, just informal assessment. Jan was talking earlier about, smaller churches having been seen in the past as maybe inferior because they didn't have the opportunity to break into these age groups. And so I think that points to an important point that, what this looks like, this is not a one size fits all. This is going to look very different in a small church versus a larger church. The challenges are going to be different in each setting. I talked with different pastors I know in different sized churches in preparing for this about what they are doing and what have tried in their churches. And it's very different depending on church size. So one thing, that is suggested in the materials on this topic is beginning with existing programs and activities. What are we already doing that we could do more intergenerationally? We don't necessarily have to introduce a whole new program. There are lots of ways we can incorporate ages together in the life of the church, in the things we're already doing. Some formats and methods that I think are particularly interesting and lend themselves well to intergenerational interaction. And we in our resource list, there are more resources that give more information on these. Storytelling, which helps create meaning and purpose, and also helps us connect us to God's story. There are some examples in some of the resources that we will recommend about ways that different generations can share their faith stories with one another, as well as their life stories. And we know that this is an important activity for older adults, to help them integrate their life experiences and find meaning in where they are now. The arts, I think, can be really powerful and helpful in intergenerational activity. There is a great program referred to in one of the books that I'm going to talk a little bit about, where it's visually based. So it's based on people getting together and looking at different images and talking about what the meaning that they find and how those images speak to them. And I think sometimes when we utilize methods like that are more arts-based, it kind of helps take us out of our regular ways of interacting. And so it can kind of level the playing field between people at different developmental levels. One other arts example I'll mention from my congregation, First Christian Church, that I think was a really great intergenerational experience was we did for several years a church art show that I co-coordinated with another church member, where we had artists of all ages from the church submit their artworks. And we hung them in a space. We had a reception, cheese and crackers. And that was a really not intended to be an intergenerational activity, but that was one of the really interesting and powerful aspects of it, was that we had, artists representing the entire age spectrum with work in there. And church members then could see what all of these people in the congregation can do, sides of people that you don't see when you just say hello to them on Sunday morning. And everybody came together for the reception. So that was a really cool intergenerational activity, I think. And then mentoring, setting up programs where older adults mentor younger adults can certainly be a great way to incorporate intergenerational activity. Okay, I think we're ready to go on to the next slide. And this is where I'm going to introduce Alexis Engelbrecht via FON. And she is currently serving as the youth director at First Christian Church in Jeff City. She has her MDiv from Phillips Theological Seminary, which is where we met. We were classmates. And she is also pursuing ordination in the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. So she's going to tell us a little bit about some intergenerational programming that she has been engaged in at First Christian Church in Jeff City.
Thank you, Kim. Paul, I think I have a slide that is next. Yes. So I'm going to provide a survey of what I have been doing at First Christian with an invitation to either ask me in the Q&A session or to reach out to me if you have questions to learn a little bit more about the specifics. But it's so exciting to hear what Jen and Kim are saying, because I can say from lived experience, amen to all of that. And I began using intergenerational experiences, that's what I call them, out of necessity. COVID and all sorts of things were making participation and attendance an ongoing struggle. I began my position in July, and I was trying to think of ways to increase participation in the group so that the youth who were coming had people to engage with and learn from. And so I learned from a very wise person with much more experience than me that grandparents can be incredibly helpful advocates in increasing youth engagement. And so I thought, well, what if for Advent, 6th to 12th graders can invite their grandparents or grandpeople to participate in a series with them? And what happens if the grandparents in my congregation or people who are people of influence in young people's life invite their youth to be part of this? And so we did an Advent series in which we met weekly by Zoom. And one of the benefits of Zoom is that you can invite anyone, anywhere. So we had grandparents and grandchildren from North Carolina and Illinois and Minnesota meeting together and seeing each other, which was also meaningful, especially because they might not be seeing they weren't able to see each other for Christmas because of the pandemic. And that's something that I hope to continue even past that, because that was just a really helpful, meaningful experience for everyone involved. So when I say youth, I'm referring to grades 6 through 12. And then whenever I say beyond, I mean beyond. We have participants in their 80s. And I will add one more thing. With the Zoom, when people sign up, they have the opportunity to express whether or not they need help in utilizing Zoom. And several adults have shared that they felt empowered and much more comfortable using Zoom. And what they found in other contexts is people just assumed they knew how to do it. So now I have people who can do fancy backgrounds and they're doing emotions and they're chatting. And so that's just an unexpected consequence of that. But I think it's worth noting as well. So what we have done, our series about Advent, we've done the Lord's Prayer. I put together material for what I call the Lenten Journey with Matthew. And right now we're in the midst of a reading and writing prayers lab. And I wanted to share something with you. I made a bookmark with prayer prompts for people. And one of the elders of the church who participates embroidered these doves. So all of the participants have this bookmark and then this creation that a beloved elder made for them. And so that's the other thing that I've been incorporating, especially since we're not meeting in person. What are physical reminders that we have that we are part of the community, even though we're not meeting together in person? What I can give you tips from experience about include different ways of inviting people and ways to get the word out and the words to use, especially if this is a new idea for your congregation. What I will name is that it's incredibly helpful to have little testimonials in your advertising, particularly from the elders of the church who are well respected, to kind of have their stamp of approval and say what the experience was like for them. That's something that I did, and I noticed that the RSVPs went up a little bit after that happened. I'm ready for the next slide, Paul. So here's some responses that I've collected, just some examples. At the end of every series, I do a survey, so I learn what went well and what might need to change for next time. And so here are some responses to the question, what do you want to remember from this experience? And these responses are from people from 6th grade to the saints of the church. One thing that continues to come up in all of the ages and all of the responses is an appreciation to be together and to spend time with each other. And another thing that I've noticed is now that our church is starting to meet in person, the older participants have some things to bring up with the younger ones. So I noticed they're mingling a little bit more outside of the groups. I'm ready for the next slide, Paul. Here's an example of something else that we've done together. So this is an Alleluia Butterfly, which can be obtained from Illustrated Ministry. At the end of our Lenten series, participants had pages that they could color, and then they left them at the church, and a volunteer and I put the butterfly together, and it's in the hallways of our church. And that's another way to let members who haven't been part of the series know what we're up to and perhaps entice them to be part of the group if they want to. And again, it's a reminder that even though we aren't meeting together in person, we still are together. And it lets the congregation know that things are still, happening, even if they're not as easy to spot as they might normally be. In the actual building, I have a list of the names of the participants too. And what I found when there was something going on and several people were in the building, I noticed people of all ages enjoyed finding their sheets, their contribution to it. And that was fun. I get a lot of inspiration from Andrew Root. These are the names at the bottom of this slide, Imelda Wright and Annie Lockhart Gilroy. I'm also providing some of my ways to reach me by email if you have questions to learn more about things. I am so passionate about intergenerational experiences that I'm starting to work on devotionals using my own work, and that's on Out of the Boat devotionals. And then Illustrated Ministry also has wonderful material that I've adopted, but they provide really helpful starting points. I'm ready for the next slide, Paul. This is how I would like to end my contribution for this time. This is the result of another survey question asking people what they found to be particularly meaningful or enriching from this experience. And again, this is 6th graders on up responding to this question. And the most popular response was listening to what others had to share. And what I've heard from members of all ages is how they learned from someone. And sometimes they learn from someone in 6th grade, and sometimes they learn from someone in their 80s. And it's just a delight to see people honor one another and and support each other. We end each session with a time to offer prayer requests, and it's just a beautiful way to care about each other across the generations. And so that I call it the practice of deep listening. In our covenant that we have, we include a thing that we agree to practice deep listening, which means we don't correct, we don't try to fix, and we don't try to problem solve. That's particularly helpful sometimes because it encourages the young ones to speak freely and not be concerned that someone's going to tell them that they're wrong. And it also kind of frees up things for the adults as well. But deep listening is something that everyone in the group has shared was a little hard at first. But whenever we do our covenant reminders and what we appreciate about our group, the most popular thing is practicing deep listening because they can see the value in that. So that's what I have to contribute right now, but I'm happy to answer follow-up questions.
Thank you, Kim and Alexis, so much. Paul, there's another slide coming that is, we can skip over if you're getting ready to run the video. Is that what you're doing? Because you're off shared screen now. Oh.
There we go. I just wanted to see everybody if anybody had any questions for Alexis, but we can move on to, I'll put the slides back up. You saw Teresa's chat, didn't you, Alexis, that she has that wonderful connections. So, all right, we'll go back to the.
So this slide is, can you hear me now speaking? Yes, okay. This slide shares some of the resources that I think Kim and Alexis both would like to recommend, and I as well. We have alluded several times to an email that we will send after today that will include our choices and list and these of materials and resources, not only books, but online links, podcasts, and so on that you might like to pursue. And our next slide is just a representation of a collage of different ways that intergenerationality can happen or work in church. And as we move through our conversation of sharing more specifics about intergenerational activities, I am ready to share with you an introduction to a short video. The video itself was created by AARP, and they have a new program project called Disrupting Aging. And this is a result of a publication by the CEO of AARP with the same title, Disrupting Aging. It poses questions and asks various generations to really look at what does aging mean and how can this be an impactful change for us. So this example of a 4-minute long video is something that I wanted to share with you, particularly now, because if we are not yet able to be together in person in our congregations, but will be soon, this is a bit of a bridge. This is a way to look at something that's insightful and slightly humorous and helpful in starting a conversation that we can do online and then carry on into a conversation once we are back together again. So I'd invite you to view this with us, and then we'll move on from there into our discussion.
Oh, sorry about that.
Okay.
Let me try the other slide. Okay. And we get ads, I'm sure.
Think you can't afford a real Jeep? Then you haven't been to Jim Butler's CDJR Powerhouse with the region's hugest inventory of new Chryslers, Dodges, Jeeps, and Rams. Top dollar for your trade-in and bar none best prices. There's a reason we're the fastest growing dealer for states around. We say yes when other dealers say no.
Join us during the Jeep Celebration event.
Jim Butler is the Jeep powerhouse.
Hey, how's it going? You can stand right there. That's your mark. How you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
Great.
Awesome.
Just tell us your first name and your age.
My real age?
My name is Paolo. I'm 25 years old.
My name is Daniela, and I'm 19.
24. 35.
31. 33.
I'm 26 years old.
What age do you consider to be old?
Late 40s?
Maybe 50.
I feel like 30 is a new 20, so I'd say like 40 is old.
I'd probably say 50s.
I'd like you to show me how an old person would cross the street. Show me how an old person would send a text message. How might an old person do a push-up? What about jumping jacks? Okay, hang on. There's someone I want you to meet.
Hello, I'm Birch. I'm 66.
Hi, I'm Daphne, and I'm 68.
I'm Dee, and I'm 55.
George Fassbinder, 75.
Wow. My name is Parvati. I'm 70.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
We're going to give you about 2 minutes to teach each other something that you are good at.
I can teach you a jump that I do.
Okay, please.
Both of your legs go up, and your arm goes up, and your left arm goes like to the side. Ready?
Okay.
1, 2, 3. Lift 1, 2, 3. And bring it to your heart. And bring it to your heart. Add the head in. Yeah.
You want to try to get your balance and raise up. Now, you can bring your legs and your feet up. It's hard, right?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7. So when you come out of a turn, either way, you go back to that basics.
Over. Now forward. Over. Yeah.
Square it like this, and give me a hook. Hook. Jab, cross, hook, and then we'll go like this, all right? 1, 2, 3.
Now, what age might you consider to be old?
Probably 80 or 90. He could just do everything that I told him to do.
An age that I would consider to be old now might be 100.
Do you remember what you said?
Yeah, I said in the 50s. I thought that would be old. But when I thought about it, like...
Wait a minute. Can I stop what I'm doing? It really changed my thinking of what old is.
You've taught me something today. Clearly, there's no way she's old, you know?
Now I know from today, hey, I don't look at age.
At my age, I feel like I did when I was in my 20s.
There's so many things that I still want to do. There's so many things that I can do. As long as I'm growing and learning, then age doesn't matter.
When people start stopping, that's when they start getting old.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thanks, Daphne. It was great meeting you.
How long have you been doing this? Is this a new skill?
40 years.
Wow.
So you can use that video yourself and see what you think about a discussion. There are discussion points, and we'll share the link so that you can see that, and hopefully pursue some conversation within your own congregation of different ages. It's a great way to launch something comfortably. But we're ready now to shift into asking you to converse with us, to have some questions or answers, but also some ideas, some dialogue and discussion. We are watching our time, so we know what time it is, and we will be finished within our time frame. And we will plan to close just with a brief summary of our resources that are available to you. But let's invite you now, and I will moderate, but you're welcome to address anyone on our panel or anyone that's participating.
Jen, I found that video to be a delight. That was just such a wonderful thing, and it caught me something personal. Whoever the young person was who was demonstrating how an old person texts, you know, I noticed they opened up the flip phone, and that's what my dad has, is a flip phone. Refuses to go to anything like this. He says, "This is my dumb phone. I don't know how to use his flip phone at all. This is much more for dummies, so I can touch a screen." But that's a nagging hang-up of mine, is his phone. And I don't know if I can overcome that or not. I go to the phone company and they said, "We don't even sell flip phones anymore. We can't service him." And so, but that's what he has, and he hangs on to it. But yeah, it's for me, navigating the patterns of comfort for what an old person thinks is something I know I need to improve on.
Thanks for sharing that, Paul. I found that video too. It's really remarkable in how amused we can be, but in how awoken we are to realities.
I'd be curious to hear what any of our participants, what kinds of intergenerational experiences you've been involved with or tried, or what worked, what didn't work, anything like that, if you have anything to share. And it may not be something that was intentionally designed to be intergenerational. It may be something that just ended up being that way.
I think our vacation Bible schools end up being that way because of the volunteer opportunities there are for either teaching or even preparing snacks and meals and singing and all of that. So VBS has a place in my heart forever, as it planted seeds of faith in me, and I still feel it's very important, and it's a great place to involve everyone. There's opportunities, even if there's a person standing there greeting the children when they come in with a smile. It could be that simple. And reading books, you know, reading a story to a child is a very intimate situation between and the sharing in it, even if it's not your story, but a story, and then having a conversation about it and hearing their comments, that's priceless.
I just want to say thank you to each of you for sharing your wealth of knowledge and experience today. It's just been wonderful. I happen to be at a congregation that is really truly multi-generational, and so there are lots of things that end up being multi-generational. Even worship itself, there's a lot of interaction between the children and you know, all ages who are there. We have had over, I don't know, maybe the last 5 years, a trunk or treat event. And that has been totally a joy and truly intergenerational. You have grandparents who are so excited to come and decorate their cars, you know, and see all the kids come through, you know, and then you have parents who are, you know, cooking food and, you know, participating in other ways, you know, so that'd be an event that I would, you know, highlight at our church anyway.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I learned a story about a church here in our region who has started a birthday celebration for anyone in the church who has a birthday in that month. Now, their congregation is large enough to do it every month, but in some smaller congregations, it could be done once a quarter or something like that. But they put a new twist on it. So during coffee hour, there is a sheet cake or sheet cakes, depending on how many are in the congregation, but it's blank. It has no icing and no decoration on it. And ahead of time during the worship, they invite anyone who has a birthday during that month to come to help decorate the cake. And so this automatically, just like Steve says, in some congregations, you get a blended age group then, but they had some hilarious stories to tell about how the 76-year-old and the 5-year-old began to argue over how many blue sprinkles there should be on this cake. And that too many blue sprinkles for the 76-year-old was just fine for the younger one, and so on. But the beauty of all of that extended to the fact that they began to share, what day of the month is your birthday? Oh, that's close to mine. Or what is your name again and how old are you turning this time? They were in conversation they never would have had otherwise with each other simply by sharing a birthday. And this was a great fun thing for them. And I think it could be replicable in almost any congregation because everyone loves cake. Anyone else?
I remember one of the things we did, this was years ago, but we had a weekly children's and youth ministry. And this is my wife's idea, but we were gathering, it was around May 1st, and which is May Day. If those of you who remember May Day, I know the seniors knew May Day. That's when you brought little baskets of flowers and you left them on people's porches. And so we had the kids make a little basket, and then we had some flowers. So they made their own little decorative baskets, and then we took them or drove the kids to where the seniors were, and then we left them on the porch. It's supposed to be a little secret, you know, you might ring the doorbell and leave, or hang them, but you know, often, you know, nothing passes the eyes of many of our seniors. They were there to open up the door as soon as somebody rolled out in front. But it was such a delightful exchange because they thought everyone forgot about May Day. And it brought back a lot of memories, and the kids learned something new too.
Yes, yes.
That's a really neat one. I worked as the activity director in a long-term care home for several years before I started seminary. And that May Day was something that often the residents would talk about their memories of that from childhood. So that's a great activity. One activity I read about, which is in one of the resources we'll share, that I thought was really cool. They called Back to the Future Night, and they had people pair in small groups with 1 to 2 older adults with a few youth. So they combined like the youth group and some of their older adults, and gave them lists of questions to talk about. So like, what was it like for you to be a 12-year-old? What was your first car? What was school like when you were growing up? And then the older adults also brought in things like yearbooks, letter jackets, you know, things like that. And so just that kind of sharing of different experiences, I thought was really a cool and pretty easy to implement idea as well.
Yes. And by extension of that, I know of one church who ended up by that process creating several evening programs for the congregation where they would choose a topic and ask volunteers who were older adults or anyone over as an adult to share a story about the topic. So one was the biggest snowstorm you remember in your childhood. And these were video recorded so that the sharing of that program was recorded. And then over a period of time, they had 4 or 5 recorded storytelling by people in the congregation, and then created an archive, a library of them for the young adults and children to also hear, because the children would jump up and sit down right in front of those who were speaking with their mouths agape when they learned about how they would go sledding and how these things happened back then. And it became a wonderful gift for the whole congregation's present, but also future. As you're saying, Kim, it reminded me of that.
Mm-hmm.
Other thoughts, other ideas, sharings?
Another thing that we've done is had prayer partners with our Sunday school children. And so anybody who wants to be a prayer partner turns in their name, and then they get paired up, and then we plan different activities for them over the course of the year. Come to Sunday school with your prayer partner, sit with your prayer partner in worship, remember your prayer partner's birthday this week, just different things. So
Nice. That's great. I know that there have been a number of churches challenged during the pandemic to figure out ways that younger people might better connect virtually or through other means with older adults, especially who are in housing situations that they were isolated or very limited in terms of or denied completely any visits at all. And so some of that was the parades and many of those kinds of things. But as a closing comment, I would like to just challenge all of us to think about church facilities too, and how there can be ways to create within our buildings more natural blending of generations. I mentioned before, and you saw on the survey with the statistics, that there are some ways that churches are sharing facility, and other community groups too, sharing their facilities with preschoolers or with after-school programs, with tutoring and mentoring, as Kim mentioned, and with older adults or adult daycare, and so on and so on. We can't underscore enough the importance of that kind of blending during the week and on Sunday. And this is a movement that is building and growing. It's not big yet, but it is many churches who are seeing that kind of a need and are looking to blend those kinds of age groups. We have some examples in Florida, as well as in Milwaukee, Minnesota, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, which are pretty impressive and are church-based. And so I'd invite you to do some research or some thinking and considering that if you're ready to go to another level or another step within your church or congregation. We want to thank you so much for being part of this today, and for sharing with us, and for allowing us to tweak some of our own passions, but also to share with you some of the ways that we find this of importance and of interest. And we know that you share that with us by joining with us today. So remember, we are all part of a web, the web of life. We all have something very important to share with each other, and that everyone at every age is God's gift, and that we can share together in God's gift. And Paul, I don't know if you would like to close us off as we finish our time together.
Well, sure. Well, this is going to be the first of a number of webinars of older adult ministries that we wish to see reveal this year. So please stay tuned. And we have another topic and another program, and we'll find a date that works for many partners to share with what they're doing. So thank you so much for being here today. And why don't I close us in prayer? Oh, gracious and most holy God, and truly you are the God of the ages, the God of all ages. And we remember that while he was still an infant, Jesus had that intergenerational moment with Anna and Simeon. And what a great model that encourage us to look for the Annas and the Simeons who might see promise in our young people at church as well. So thank you for these dedicated leaders, these pastors, these friends, to share the encouragement and ideas that we can help all of our churches grow. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Thank you so much, Paul, for being our host and tech. And thank you to every one of you. You'll hear from us again.
Yes, thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Robert says
presenters.
thanks too. So.
Thank you.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.